Welcome back to Mindset Mastery Moments, the podcast where we're disrupting limiting beliefs and dive deep into the power of mindset. I'm your host, of course, Dr. Alisa, and today's episode is one that hits home for so many professionals. Yes, we are going to be discussing career grief, that moment when the job ends, but identity loss, the fear, the spiral that begins. Listen, I have been there, and today you're probably going to get a whole lot of vulnerability from me as well. Whether it's being let go, passed over, laid off, or just pushed into an unexpected pivot, this episode will speak to your soul. Today's guest is the gorgeous and uber talented Laverne McKinnon, former senior vice president of drama development at CBS. We are just so blessed at Mindset Mastery Moments. She was at the height of her career when suddenly she was let go. Even after major wins at EPIX and co-producing the Netflix series GIRLBOSS. Yes, it took her a decade to process that loss. Now a powerhouse, executive leadership coach, and certified grief recovery specialist, Laverne helps high performers heal from career grief and rise stronger than ever. Today, Laverne, we are just so honored to have you at Mindset Mastery Moments. Welcome to the show. I'm thrilled to have you here. Let's dive in.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Lisa, I love the work that you do around mindset because, and it's really like led me to my work as well for so long as an executive. And then even when I started my coaching practice, I was always so focused on the doing. And it wasn't until I began to understand how important mindset is that my life began to change and my career really began to transform. So I love to help people who are in any type of career transition. So whether it means like moving up the ladder, trying to get on the ladder, or sadly moving off the ladder, whether it's one's choice or not, that's like my sweet spot. And what I discovered through my own experiences, you mentioned how I was fired from my job at CBS after 10 years. And it took me so long to recover. And in working with clients who are in transition, what I discovered is that there's such an important element that gets overlooked, which is this concept of career grief. And that grief is not only for, reserved for people when someone that you care about has died. And it falls under this category that bereavement experts call disenfranchised grief. So that means any type of grief that's not openly acknowledged, socially validated, or even like publicly mourned. And so when someone, gets laid off, fired, downsized, a project that you've been working on, it tanks or loses funding or is not well received, those can all be grief events. But most people are like, oh, Laverne, I'm so sorry that happened to you. What are you thinking about next? And it's like, I just need a moment.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that is exactly, I have been there. And I think the more you spoke into it, I was like, oh, so that was what was happening, and again, depending on where you are, whether you are the major provider of your household, the only provider of your household, or you might be a single person like me. I wrote in my best-selling book, I opened it talking about me being laid off at the height of my career as a career counselor in the state of Florida, where I was finally, I would say, at the top of my career, making really good money for me at the time. And I had a beautiful condo down in Port St. Lucie, Florida, that was very, very close to the ocean, which is where I wanted to be. I had just separated from my ex-husband, and we were going through, the unraveling of setting our little unit of two that at that time we would have been married for 12 years, all at the same time. I thought I just wanted to die. I talk about it all the time. It's part of my key stories that I talk about in my keynote, except I've not approached it from a space of grief, but I talk about the shifting my mindset. But now that makes sense. And I did go through the loss of work again. I got laid off a second time in my journey, unbeknownst to me. I kind of felt it coming, but nothing prepares you, right? So let's dive into it, because I'm sure a lot of people can relate, but don't know what it is. Like, we don't know what it is. You find yourself sad and crying. So your story and your journey that you shared with us, being at the top, like girl boss, let's talk about it. Big brave, right? How did you discover it was something you needed to confront, really? Like, I mean, like you said, people just want you to pivot. How did you know you needed to confront it?
And that's the thing, I didn't. And so I thought that I was broken. I thought that there was something wrong with me, right, that I couldn't bounce back. Wow. And I'm someone who's very driven, I'm ambitious. And like, if you told me, Laverne, you're going to have to run, 3 back-to-back marathons in order to make this happen, I'd be like, oh, well, that really sucks. But if that's what I have to do, I'll do it. And so I did everything after I was fired. Like, I went into therapy, I worked with a coach, I went to workshops, I read a gazillion different books about resilience and, getting my mojo back. And even though I went on to other high-profile jobs and had success, inside, I still felt shattered to a gazillion pieces. And what I discovered about grief, which I think is really important for people to understand, is that someone else could be fired from a job and be like, yay, hallelujah. It's like, I'm so ready to move on, and they will not experience grief. So grief is a direct response to the depth of attachment that someone has to a person, a place, or a thing. And that attachment is unique. It's not universal. So we all are attached, but we're attached to different things. I was deeply attached to my job at CBS. So when I lost that job, that's why I was crushed. And I'm curious for you, with the job that you had in Florida, like, what was the attachment? Like, what were you attached to as a career counselor there?
That career was a career switch for me. That was my first move from the education administration industry. But it was the fulfillment I got out of seeing clients light up. Not only I was a career counselor, but I also was the operations manager for an entire job center. So all the pieces of me came to life. The educator was able to be facilitative, the creative, the innovator, the coach, the manager, the process, the operations specialist, the workforce strategist, the leadership. Everything was just blooming in that role, in that position, in that job. So for me, it was like I had found my my thing, and I could go on doing this forever. And now it wasn't there anymore. And I didn't get a warning. Like, I was called into the office and I was like, what is going on? The VP had almost had tears in his eyes, and he's like, this really sucks. And it really sucks that you are the first person that I'm going to have to say this to today. But we're having to, and they went over the budget, and that was it. I had to get my stuff and I had to leave.
Wow. I'm so sorry that you had that experience of being laid off due to budget cuts.
That's government nonprofit for us.
Yeah. And the being blindsided element as well, which was also my experience. There had been some tension in my relationship with my boss, but I never thought that I was going to be fired, because I also had like a year left on my contract. And so it was a real surprise.
Yes.
Part of what I'm hearing in your experience too is that how much being an educator, a coach, an innovator, like all of these things, yes, that were part of your identity.
I did.
And so that's frequently what people are attached to when it comes to career grief is that our jobs, our job title is a significant part of our identity. And it's also, it links to our culture as well. Like in Western culture, so frequently the first thing that people say is like, oh, hey, what do you do? And it puts a lot of emphasis that our jobs and our job titles are how we walk through life and how we find our people and how we find a sense of belonging.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It was absolutely the identity. And what is more scary about that piece is how much self-identity it becomes for you and you don't realize it. And so I believe the pivot was I can either live in a mindset of fear, never to identify with the roles I play for the expression. So I have this quote that I say, a career is more than just a job, it's the very expression of your purpose grounded legacy. And why I say that, and that came from me, it's to understand that what I do for work is just one expression of who I am and not who I am. It's one expression. That means I can change and shift and pivot that expression, where I express it, who I express it with and for, what I make. And so that is my reminder to myself and whoever I talk to and I'm coaching, that you can pivot. This could pivot without notice and you will still be okay, because now you get to do it in another way, in another place, with other people. And it's okay to feel that grief, feel sad that you're having to leave this. But when you are ready to pivot, you can and you will, and you can do that safely. And what that looks like for you, only because I could have gone to a fear-based mindset where I never get attached to my work again and I never identify and take ownership in it. Or I learned to do the other side, which is understand it's who I am and what I do is with me, and the plate where I do it and who I do it with can change. That's how I pivot. That's where my mind rests. And I'm so excited to deep in, because I know you've got more information and how you actually make the transition, because there is the grief piece and there is that identity. We're not going to walk away from that, but I guess that shift in my mindset, because it did happen a second time, believe it or not. And I endured grief. But this time I was pivoting and grieving at the same time. I was pivoting and grieving at the same. I didn't know to call it grief like you do, but I knew the sadness. I felt it and I acknowledged it. I felt anger and I acknowledged it. And I walked through it and I was way better off. And to me, the journey, I healed faster and I pivoted better. Because I had a different type of mindset on it.
That mindset component that you just spoke about, that I feel like was the universe trying to teach me that my job is not my identity. My job is not my purpose. It's a manifestation of, because when I was fired, I had this belief then that I am no longer competent and capable. And I was so tied to that because I had been promoted every 18 to 24 months over that 10-year period of time. Mm-hmm. And so I clung to that identity, and then being fired shattered that. And that's the thing that I was really attached to. So when in the work that I do, I talk about visible losses and hidden losses. So the visible loss was I no longer have my job. I don't have my title. I don't have the salary. I don't have the benefits. I don't have the parking space anymore. And I lost my community, because I worked so hard that the people that I was working with, I really did consider them family, which was a mistaken belief. It's like I can be close, but they're not family. Right. And then the hidden losses that are underneath that are things like identity, confidence, esteem. And those are really huge, because, and I'm an example of this, I went on to other jobs, but my hidden losses were never tended to. And so through the tasks of grief, we begin to take a look at that and start to acknowledge. And this goes so much to mindset, which is like, I thought I'd lost my identity. And then through the mindset work, I began to understand no, I lost the job. I didn't lose who I am.
Right.
And then that allowed me to understand how I could then pivot to the next thing from a place of wholeness as opposed to brokenness.
Oh, I love that. I love so empowering, so empowering. For someone who might not identify that they would be experiencing career grief, what are some of those signs that some people might be experiencing when they're going through that? Even if they don't realize it, like you said, there were those, the ones you can see and the ones that you don't know and recognize. What does those look like?
I so appreciate this question because there are manifestations that are almost identical to any other form of grief. If you're, bereavement, divorce, loss of a pet. So, for example, there are physical symptoms. So it could be sleep is impaired, either sleeping too much or having insomnia, eating too much or complete loss of appetite. Wow. There are also cognition issues as well that are typical in terms of like walking into a room. It's like, okay, why did I walk in here? Having difficulty focusing. Sometimes people's memories are impaired as well. And then there also, it's not unusual that there could also be trauma that's related to the grief event from career. And while I'm not an expert in terms of trauma, I am trauma informed. And so there are things like avoiding certain places or people, ruminating, like thoughts that are going, spiraling around and around and around. And then there can also, and this, it all ties together through a trauma lens of nervous system dysregulation. And so, for example, when I would drive past my old place of work, CBS, my heart would begin to like beat very fast.
Yeah.
And I would get sweaty and I would like feel a spike of anxiety.
Ooh.
And so I really appreciate you asking this question of like, okay, what are these signs and symptoms? So if you are experiencing this might be an invitation to push the pause button and say, wow, that event may have been a grief event. And so I need to give myself permission to grieve, even though someone hasn't died.
Right, exactly. Unfortunate for me, that's big. The first time I had the big loss of my job, getting laid off like that in the state of Florida, which by the time I got myself ready to move here, I got a position and I was flying out here. That was about maybe almost a year later, I think. Yeah. They had called me back. They had gotten a grant and they couldn't wait to ask me back, but I'd already said yes to a position here in Arizona and I was packing my stuff to move. But what are some of those unexpected causes of this kind of grief? Like the things that people usually don't associate with this loss?
Well, I may be answering this question from a sideways perspective, is that because career grief is not something that is known, people get blindsided by, why am I having this ongoing reaction? And so I'm always curious for people like, what was like the first 24 hours or the first week like after you heard? And what I sometimes hear or frequently hear from people is that they immediately move into taking care of their resume, updating their LinkedIn, jumping onto Indeed. And that's certainly what I did because I went into panic. Well, that's actually not true. I went into a cave for about 9 months and then I came out and this was like, okay, I have to get a job. And again, this is so much about what I appreciate about the work that you do is that it's important to leave space for the spiritual work.
Yes.
To be able to identify it's like, what are my hidden losses? What are the visible losses and what really needs to be tended to? Mm-hmm. And for some people, like that tending, it can be, it's like, great, let me, slap a Band-Aid or a cast on that emotional ouch. For other people, it takes time because this is so new. And if you're someone whose identity has been rocked by by the grief event, that takes some time to put that back together. And so I just want listeners to know there's nothing wrong with you, that this is normal and that everybody grieves uniquely. And so some people can bounce back really quickly, and some people, like me, it took me over 10 years.
Right. And, I would add to that, Laverne, that you could be fine a year later, and then out of nowhere, something's happening. Like, after my second time I got laid off from another position, get nonprofit budget cuts again. I mean, it was just a mess. And what I realized is that a year later, I was in a new role, and I literally called it PTSD. Something one of the supervisors or leaders that I work alongside said and did. And I said to her, can I have a conversation with you? Because I guess by this time I've already learned my coping. I got my toolbox, of mindset things and working and taking care of myself, and also managing, making sure everybody else is okay. I said, when you said this, I wasn't clear, but I also want to acknowledge that I might be having a little bit of PTSD from past experience. So I really just want to talk this through with you so I can understand you. This is how I felt, but it might not have anything to do with you, but I still want us to be on the same page so that as we move along, I can manage, and any weird responses or anything doesn't happen. I really just kind of want to clear the air and leave room for us to grow in this area. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I know. I give you this long explanation. I was like, but when you said this is how I felt. And again, like, it could just be something from my past experience. So what I realized is that I was in a very toxic I was around very, very toxic leadership and an environment where there's a lot of chaos, but still a lot of go, 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 go. I love that. I had my own space, but I had suffered some things. And then the abrupt end came like, oh yeah, we're cutting you. And feeling like, okay, so why would you cut me when I'm the highest performance across the United States in this department? Like, it didn't make sense. But some of the leaders had some other issues with me because I was accountable. I held accountability for what was happening. So I didn't just get along to go along. I'd be like, well, here's the thing. This has not worked. Here's why. Here's what I have been doing that work. That's not allowed. So I felt like I could not say things, and I held back in the new environment. So when I was asked, I didn't want to perform at the new role, new position, because for fear that I would experience retaliation. And if there was a budget cut, I'll be the first to get cut. So I was still experiencing grief a year later, even though I was seemingly okay. I had post-traumatic stress disorder a little bit, with things popping up. And that was another thing I had to grieve because I felt ashamed. Before I approached her, I lost sleep the entire night. I was anxious before because, again, I was like, I don't know, I should be talking about it. So the whole thing of how I lost the job and everything came up again.
I'm so moved by what you said, because your sense of safety and security within a job environment had been impacted. And yes, that threat of PTSD carries through as we continue to move forward. That Mary Frances O'Connor wrote an amazing book called The Grieving Brain. And in it, she talks about grief in a way that I found to be so accessible, which is, people believe it's like, okay, I just have to get on the other side of grief. Okay, I just have to work my way through it and then I can get over it. The hard truth is that grief, it doesn't go away. And she gives an analogy or a metaphor. I always get analogy and metaphor confused.
I'm that person.
That grief is like a broken bone. And so I'm pointing to my arm right now because I once broke my arm in 3 places, is that if you don't set that broken bone, you might still be able to function. There's going to be pain, limited movement. It's going to be wildly uncomfortable, but you can, navigate through life. If you set the bone properly, you can probably regain, 100% of movement. You're not going to have pain. You're going to be able to get back to your normal activities that you enjoy. However, if we x-ray the arm, a year later, 10 years later, you will always see that arm had been broken at some point. And so it is with grief, that we learn how to integrate the grief into our lives and into our identity with the acknowledgement that sometimes the grief event is traumatic and that there's PTSD. I love and appreciate what you did. I call it like the 3 C's, which is that you pause long enough to access compassion for yourself. That, okay, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling wonky, something isn't right. And then you gave yourself courage and you had a difficult conversation with your manager. And so we've got compassion, we've got courage, and because you became curious, you allowed yourself to get curious and say, is there something going on? Or am I making this up because of previous experience? And so
I thought it was a mixture of both. She even said, the feedback on that was like, she's like, I probably delivered it off. No, it's not. I said, well, I think it's a mixture of both. And we laughed about it and chuckled about it as 2 women, understanding, but it was I struggled to be vulnerable in that moment. But I felt the only way I could attack this is head on, because I don't want it to have rule and reign over me in any of my professional relationships.
Yeah, exactly. And we're teeing something up in terms of like the tasks of grief. And I'd love to take a moment here just to be really explicit around that, which is one of the first tasks of grief is acknowledging there was a grief event, that I was attached to something that I lost. Wow. And then we take a look at the visible and the hidden losses, and then we give ourselves permission to mourn. And I'm going to pause here for a moment before I go on to the other tasks of grief, because there are 2 types of grievers. There are head grievers and heart grievers. So I'm a heart griever, and I have a sense that you're a heart griever as well, where it's like we love to talk about our feelings. We probably journal together.
Yes.
Head grievers are people who like to take action. So they might be people who like jump back into work, or, go build a fence, or like go do something.
Quick question. Can you be both? Because I feel like I do them both.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You can be both. 100%. Yes. And so I share this because there's a mistaken belief that we must talk about our feelings in order to be able to get to the other side of grief. That's actually not necessarily true.
Okay.
And so
I love that you said that. I never knew that.
Yes. And so sometimes there's like a lot of judgment about like, oh, you should go join a group. You should go see a therapist. You should, and there's a lot of shoulds in that. And so the deep benefit of being a head griever and being able to take action is it's another way to be with emotion that allows us to have a sense of agency and control. Wow. So this isn't exactly an apples to apples example, but there was a man who very tragically, his son stole a car, got into an accident, and it ripped down the fence of the neighbor's lawn. And so the man wound up rebuilding the fence for his neighbor. And his neighbor was like, you don't have to do this. But it was so important to him because it represented being able to put their lives back together, fence post by fence post by fence post. And so it was very healing for him, because what was broken for this father, for this man, was that I can always keep my son safe. And the hard truth is that he can't.
It's not possible.
And so this then tees up the next task of grief, which is creating a ritual. So we have rituals for when people die, funerals, memorial services, depending on people's religious beliefs. You could sit Shiva. When my mother died, I planted a tree. Right. And so we do things to memorialize. And now this goes back to Mary Frances O'Connor in The Grieving Brain, which is that rituals are important because it teaches our brain that the thing that we were attached to is no longer there.
Oh,
And that's why we sometimes have cognition issues when we're grieving, because our brains, there's this thing called pattern recognition.
yeah.
So we look for what we're attached to. So I enjoyed my drive to work every day. I'd listen to a podcast or I'd listen to some music to put me in the mood. And so after I was fired, I would have this sense of like, I need to get up. I need to go get ready. I need to get in the car.
Right.
And it was disorienting and I was confused because my brain didn't understand that that job no longer existed.
Exactly.
Yeah. At nighttime, as part of my job, I would read scripts every night in order to prepare for the next day. And at night, I'd have this sense of anxiety. It's like, I'm not reading. I'm not preparing for the next day. And it affected my sleep because I couldn't relax. I thought there was something that had to be done, and there wasn't. So creating a ritual to have what I call like a good goodbye is very important to teaching the brain that that thing is no longer there.
Oh my goodness. That is so good. So good. Who would have ever thunk it?
I know.
I'm so glad you came with this. It's so important. So many times as a workforce strategist, I work on the front end of getting you from whatever you have gone through and done and haven't done, or where do you want to go, and help you get into there. But not a lot of people are doing this. Not enough people that I'm aware of, let me just say, we're doing this work, because let's figure, if I'm working with someone who is just went through this, they're a different client from someone who just got out of college and looking for their next thing, right? And so I honestly feel like, oh my goodness. And so quick thing, I had this beautiful partnership where I serve in a nonprofit here in Arizona, working with the badges, men and women who served, firefighters, police officers, anybody who worked paramedics, and, they work long careers and then they retire. A lot of them are like not very old anymore because they start off so young, but then they retire and they kind of know retirement's coming. And so just to introduce them a little bit in my coaching is I talk about that loss and that loss of identity a little bit, but then there's a therapist that comes in. And we meet every month with different groups throughout the East and West Valley of these officers. And we do presentations. I do the workforce piece, and then we have the therapist, and we have finance and all that, getting them prepped. Such a unique, I love that. I just would love to see that type of organization duplicated throughout the world. But we have a therapist come in to talk about that transition to help them. They're still working. Some of them has 2 years. But when you said that, it just like my brain went fire, and I'm going off the deep end right now, because we don't understand that that is still a major loss, that you literally need to have a memorial and all those steps. Then I just want to know what else, because of course, listeners, of course, we're going to tell you how to get a hold of Laverne, but this right here, you need to pass this episode on to someone, everyone, only because at some point, if we haven't, we will go through this loss of identity through career, or what we thought would have been in our business. Even as entrepreneurs, I would love for you to touch on that as well, because sometimes you might have contracts as an entrepreneur that you create such an identity and a routine of being and doing with that you lose. Can this happen to someone who is in the entrepreneurial space as well, is what I want you to tell us and comment on.
This applies 100% to entrepreneurs. I mean, you're a solopreneur, I'm a solopreneur, and I've certainly had, in my experience with clients, it falls into two different categories. Either as an entrepreneur, there's a product launch and it fails. For whatever reason, and the entrepreneurs poured their heart, their soul, resources, financially, energy, And that is a legitimate grief event. And then there's a category where the business overall just fails for entrepreneurs, which, we're unfortunately seeing that quite a bit. And it all applies. And I'm thinking about, I wanted to give an example of a ritual. So this doesn't specifically apply to entrepreneurs, but I think that there are some parallels where I love to use art through rituals. Although I've had like some clients will take a piece of like an old contract or a script, and they'll print it, and then they'll bury it, and they'll write a eulogy, and then they'll invite a couple of friends or people who understand the experience, and then they'll speak that eulogy out loud and then say, "Rest in peace."
Wow.
Another ritual that I've done myself, and I have clients doing as well. I took one of my suits, a very fancy suit from my corporate job. I don't know why I still have them. And I cut it up and I made it into a puppet. And that sits on a shelf where I can look at it, which is a reminder for me that I no longer want to be a puppet, that I really value being an entrepreneur, and that corporate life served me for a long time, but it's no longer aligned with my values and with my life purpose. And so we can create these rituals in just, in wildly, different ways. So there isn't like a one size fits all, but the key aspects to the ritual is identifying something from the grief event and then converting it and saying goodbye to it.
Yeah. I love that. And it's almost as if I'm like, I need to figure out rituals for grief of different things that I have had that I've either lost, I've had to let go. And so this is where I want to pivot a little bit. I know I'm digging deep into your work, but I love what you do here and what you've done with your journey. So there are some people who, I guess this is more a question, but can you have career grief when you have to walk away, when you have to leave? And is it the same? Is it different? Would you approach it differently, or you kind of treat it as the same with you call them the tasks? Is that what
Yes, the tasks of grief. So I like to differentiate because there aren't rules to grief, like whether you have to talk or, take 2 days off or take 6 months off. So there are no rules, but there are these tasks. And the choice to leave a job, the choice to defund a project, it doesn't take away the fact that there can still be grief. And there's a lot of judgment around that. And I also see it, this might be a more relatable example, but like, oh, you chose to leave your spouse. Why are you feeling sad? It's like,
right.
Yeah. And it's like, no, or you chose to move from Florida to Arizona. Why are you bummed out? It was your choice.
Exactly.
It's like our choices can still reflect that we had an attachment to something that we're saying goodbye to that's no longer a match for us, but we can still miss it. It can still have a lot of significance and meaning for us.
I agree. I love that. That is so important. And it just makes so much sense. So can you just run us through, before we move into our next segment, those tasks again for someone who's listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first is to really identify and recognize that there is a grief event and that it is a reflection of the depth of attachment that you had to a person, place, or thing. And then we begin to look at what are the visible losses and then the hidden losses. And then we give ourselves permission to mourn. And I didn't dive into that too much because mourning looks different for everybody. And that's where we get into the head grievers or the heart grievers. And then we find a ritual to have a good goodbye to whatever it is that we lost and that we're missing. And I'm glad that we're reviewing this, because then the next step is then to take agency. is then, okay, what is the next step that you want to take to move your life forward, to move your career forward, to put you back into a place where you have a sense of control and autonomy. And so those in the like very high level are the tasks of grief.
Right. Oh, I love it. And I love the task of grief because what I'm hearing you say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it's going to your way of grieving is going to look differently from the next guy or the next gal. However, for you to come through this, not get over it safely, there are certain tasks or things that you want to do so you get through safely. Whatever time frame that looks like, it's you. But do them so that you can help along your journey of recovery. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And we can infuse the 3 C's through that, where it's like having self-compassion, having courage, getting curious. And I know the idea for many people of, oh, I don't really want to go into this because it sounds really painful. And I'm not going to lie, it is painful. And that pain is going to remain at the level of intensity until you work through the tasks of grief.
Yes.
By going through the tasks of grief, the intensity of the pain reduces so that you can then be able to move forward in life.
So, application question, the tasks, are you going to repeat them as often as you need to? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. I have so many, I've done so many different rituals. I've now become I'm actually right now really thinking about a ritual that I want to create because I had a parting of ways with a client, and I really miss this client, and I'm very, very sad about it. And it's interesting because I was like, am I sad or am I grieving? And as I've sat with this over the last several weeks, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm grieving.
You're grieving. How did you know the difference? How can we tell the difference? How do we know if we're sad or just grieving or both?
Well, it's because the sadness has not gone away. And so I'm experiencing, like at night when I'm going to sleep, I'm thinking about this client. During the day, I'm like ruminating about different things that were said that I'm like, oh. And then this client popped up on my LinkedIn feed and I felt my heart skip a beat. So I was like, oh, I'm experiencing physical, mental, spiritual, there's no trauma in this.
No.
It's just like a recognition that, well, I love all of my clients because I had worked with this client for so many years that I just had a depth of attachment that was unique.
It was unique. And I guess too, I think more than anything, it's almost like when you have this client, you're attached to benchmarks and outcomes with them. And you have this thing, okay, so I want to see him or her get here and this is the plan, and you just feel like you're going to be there with them for that entire journey, and it'll, whatever happens, you don't really think what happens after, but then here comes midway and they either quit on the journey, they don't want to put the work in anymore, so you become the enemy because you're kind of keeping them accountable along the way. That part, I've been through that over and over again and did not observe and realize that it was grief once I got in that prolonged space of when I think of them, or I go through an email and I see they pop up, or I might be pulling, notes and things and I see that pop up and I'm like, I have this, I feel like I get like, darn man, that sucks. And I'm like, I wonder what they're doing. And then now I'm looking to see if I can find evidence on anything on social media of them following through. Sometimes I'm like, well, I've had it where I'm like, is it the person you cared about more, or was it the outcome, and I question myself, but I'm like, no, it's all of it. It's all of it. God damn it. And it sucks. And I just acknowledge that it sucks and I kind of move along. But I feel like having these tasks that you're given is very helpful, because what I fear for, I guess, most anyone that I work with, I have in my family, anywhere in my circle, is when I realize that they shut down the idea of acknowledging at first that they've lost something. Like I think I love that you've taught us today, head and heart. I believe I've grown past thinking everyone has to be a certain way. I'm almost 45, so I'm like, I think I got that down. But I also don't see any connection. It's like they just shove it under, not in a rug, under a rock that's covered by a rug that is hidden in a cave. And they will not do any acknowledgement or anything, but their behavior, they're lashing out in different places. And they're like I call it a pressure cooker. Like it just goes, and you never know when it's going to do it. Like sure enough, or then you do know there is a rhythm. And that's all because they're ignoring that grief that they're experiencing. So I hope that someone that's listening today, if you might not realize that you're like, what's wrong with me? I'm fine. I got a new job. I got a new career. Everything's going great in my life. Why do I seem to not be able to sleep? I have this anxiety thing going on here and there. I lash out at people. It could be that you're suffering with career grief.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing up outbursts. I certainly experienced that where like I've always been high functioning and it's like I could be like zen, and then all of a sudden I go from 0 to 80. And that's because I had unprocessed big feelings that I didn't understand. And I completely relate to like hiding that under a rock, putting a rug on it, putting a chair on top of that and sitting on it and being like, I am not going to, because it feels too enormous and overwhelming. Yeah. And so, the tasks of grief give us a structure and a container to acknowledge what we're feeling and experiencing. Right. It's powerful and transformative work.
Quick question before we go to flip the script. I know I'm just digging in. There are some personalities that you will have in your life and in your world that love it if you're a head griefer and you just move on. There's a lot of people I found that would cheer you on and make it feel like good for you. You're not even letting that phase you. They will cheer on the ignoring of the loss and what is possible because they're not aware. They're not aware. But then there's some that could see you, like for heart grievers, everyone sees a heart griever, right? Readily. And they'll be like, well, why are you so sad? Like, you move on. Like, what's the big deal? That job didn't deserve you anywhere. Like, you knew that your whole department was just toxic. You weren't even getting to do what you want. And they try to talk you. How do you deal with that when you want to follow and do your task of grieving? Like, what steps can you take?
That it's another hard truth is that people may not understand the experience that you're having and the experience that you want to have. And I've certainly encountered that where people are like, what? It's like, and also we have to acknowledge that in a professional environment that grief can be scary for people. And so my recommendation to clients and to listeners is, and I don't mean this to sound as flippant as it's going to, but it's like, know your audience. It's like, go to people, that you do have alignment with and shared values who are capable of being with you, of holding space. And much like you did when you had that conversation with your boss, where you created a structure for that and you asked for what you needed. Now, the hard thing is that we can ask for what we need. We don't always get it.
Don't be attached to that.
Yes, exactly. And so this might be, a situation, especially like if you're going to a spouse or a friend, which is to say, I think I'm grieving over what happened and I'd love to be able to share this with you. And at least for me, it's like, I'm actually not looking for any advice. I'm just needing a sympathetic ear to hear what I have to say because I just need to think this stuff out loud.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, I
Do we
love
get to
that.
flip the script now?
Yes, we get to flip the script. Are you ready? This is our favorite part of the show as well, where we
Yes.
share a moment about how we shift our own mindset to reclaim our power. And you shared so many of that. If you have another one, what was that mindset shift? How did you change the outcome in that you've had? Just a time when you had flipped the script. I mean, another one, I guess, because you definitely flipped the script from working at CVS and pivoted so well. So if you want to share something else in between that time.
I have one more that has been huge for me. And this is something that I learned from the very first coach that I worked with, Mona Miller, rest in peace. She sadly died 8 months after we started working together. And her last voicemail to me was, honey, you know more than you think you do. We'll talk on Tuesday. And I have always held that with me. But what the mindset shift that Mona helped me find was that I would get so frustrated and angry when people would not do what they said. And I have very rigid rules. I'm someone who's like, say what I do what I say. And while I intellectually know that not everybody lives by that, I secretly expect it from everyone.
Yeah, I still do. I still am struggling. I ain't there yet.
Yes. And so what Mona taught me was that I was relying 100% on listening to people's words. And she said, make that 10%. You need to listen to people's actions and their energy. Yeah. And I was like, whoa. And so I frequently coach myself to say, ignore what they said. What have their actions told me? Yeah. And so that has been a huge game changer for me, and a mindset shift that I have not mastered, and I constantly remind myself about.
That is profound. Thank you. And God bless her. I'm taking that with me. 10%. I think I've made that. I've been making that pivot for a while because I am a person that I guess I was called gullible. I was called all kinds of things for believing that people are going to do what they said, but it's just because you expect people to do. I have to ask, what does success mean to you now, Laverne? After everything that you have done and achieved, what does success mean to you now?
It's really living my values and my purpose as opposed to living other people's values.
Ooh.
And because I have been driven and ambitious, I have unintentionally taken other people's values as my own as a way to be successful. And that has led me down paths where I have felt horrifically out of alignment. And now being an entrepreneur, and my agency was taking my grief event and becoming a coach who specializes in this work. And I'm finding that I'm so much more aligned with the things that are important to me through being an entrepreneur and not being in corporate America. And so that really is success to me, is if at the end of the day I can say, yep, I lived 80% of my values, because nothing is ever 100%. But if I lived 80% of my values in a given day, I'm like, that was a really successful day.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It resonates with me. Oh, I love this. Well, we are at Mindset Bites to go, Laverne. This is where, if you could leave the listeners with one powerful takeaway or action step that they can apply today, what would it be? I step away from the microphone and the camera, and it's all you. I will go ahead and I will do that now.
I really want to encourage people to take a moment that if you're feeling any type of heaviness or residue from something that happened in your professional life, is just giving yourself permission to say, oh, wait a second, was that a grief event? And does that require mourning and being able to give yourself that compassion, and then getting curious and acting with courage. That grief, again, it's a normal part of being a human. And of course, we're going to experience grief in all aspects of our life, not just through the death of a loved one. And so my wish and my longing for you is to be able to walk through life and integrate grief into it so that you can be completely whole and not ever have this feeling that there's something wrong with you or that you're broken.
Absolutely profound. Oh, Laverne, it's so awesome. I just have to tell you, that was so profound. I love how you left that with us. Laverne, everyone wants to know, what's your favorite way for us to reach out and connect with you? Of course, you all know we have it all in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this episode. How would you prefer for us to reach out to you, Laverne?
My invitation, I know not everybody is on a platform called Substack, but if you're not, check it out. I'm Moonshot Mentor, or even my name, Laverne McKinnon, on Substack. And the reason why I like to send people to Substack is that we have a beautiful community there. I do weekly blog posts. I have live Zoom sessions where we get to work through career grief. There are meditation drops every week. And so there are just a lot of resources to support people through whatever professional transition they're going through. And if you're not on Substack, you can just head over to my website, lavernemckinnon.com.
Oh, I will absolutely. I haven't checked out Substack yet. Sounds like an amazing tool. So you guys will catch me over there exploring Laverne's community. I don't know. I've heard the words before, but no one has have you guys, what do you do? Yeah, so we'll be checking it out, guys. Listen, Laverne, thank you for your courage, your wisdom, and for showing us that career grief isn't the end of the story, obviously, because you are winning, my sister. It starts with a powerful reinvention. Friends, if today's conversation spoke to something deep in you, know that you're not alone. You can rise again. So I'm Dr. Alisa and Laverne, and we're saying keep mastering your mindset. Think, speak, do, become. Allow yourself to be the best version of yourself every time, because you deserve it and the world is waiting on you. Until next time, we'll see you later.